3 spine-chilling cursed diner encounters that expose sinister truths and haunted secrets. Maya felt it in the air the moment she stepped into the Midnight Feast diner. The grease-stained walls seemed to close in on her, buzzing with the weight of unspoken secrets. Tonight was different. The flickering neon sign cast eerie shadows, illuminating the forgotten corners of the diner where whispers lingered. The clock ticked relentlessly towards midnight, and an alarming chill crept up her spine. Were those voices? Low and distorted, they echoed from the kitchen like long-buried memories clawing their way back to the surface. Her heart raced as she moved behind the counter, each thump echoing in her ears. She took a deep breath, trying to shake off the creeping dread. The diner was empty, not a soul in sight, just a few scattered utensils and the lingering scent of frying oil. Normally she found comfort in the solitude of the night shift, but tonight felt like the calm before a storm. As darkness thickened around her, the door swung open with a scrape, and in walked a former cop named Gus. He was a ghost of a man, with haunted eyes that told of nights spent chasing shadows. He slid onto a stool at the counter, his presence a jarring note in the quiet. "Coffee, please," he grunted, but Maya couldn't shake the heaviness of his stare. This wasn't just a late-night customer, this was a man with secrets too. Maya poured his coffee, hands trembling ever so slightly. "What brings you in tonight?" she ventured, hoping for casual small talk, but his gaze remained distant, as if lost in a fog of recollections. "You know, this diner has seen things," he murmured, leaning in closer. Each word dripped with the weight of nostalgia laced with unease. "Things like what?" she prompted, her curiosity piqued, despite the anxiety knotting in her stomach. He avoided her eyes, blaming the steam rising from his cup. "Disappeared folks. Stories nobody wants to remember." His voice lowered, drenched in the past. "Happened a few years back, you know, the kind of stuff you don't forget." Maya's stomach twisted, the familiar burden of her own life pressing in. She gripped the counter, fighting a rising tide of panic. The diner felt alive, as if it was listening, pulsing with energy. She glanced outside. The street lamp flickered, casting more unsettling shadows in the empty booth corners. She could feel the diner's history tightening around her, dragging her deeper into the dark. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As more patrons trickled in, each one bore an unmistakable mark of sorrow. Eyes glazed, faces twisted in contemplation. They slipped into booths and whispered among themselves, their conversations threading through the din like a web of tension. The weight of grief hung in the air. Maya could almost hear it breathing. Who were they hiding? What ghosts clamored behind their smiles? Then the door creaked open again, sending chills racing down her spine. A stranger stepped in, his demeanor casual, but with an undercurrent of menace. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and the room seemed to constrict around him. Maya's heart pounded, heavy like a stone. Gus eyed the newcomer, tension crackling between them. Did he recognize him? Maya stood frozen, her hands sticky and clammy as the shadows thickened, urgent and hungry. There was a weight in the air now, something unspoken threatening to erupt. The diner became a crucible of twisted fates and hidden truths. Would Maya be able to protect her children from the darkness encroaching on her life? Or would they too become whispers in the cursed diner, lost to its haunting past? Maya swallowed hard as the stranger sauntered over to the counter, his boots echoing on the grimy floor like a drumbeat of doom. The diner fell into a frightened silence, eyes darting and breaths held. She could feel Gus's tension radiating like heat from a furnace, and the air thickened with impending dread. "What do you want?" Maya's voice trembled, cutting through the thick silence. The stranger leaned against the counter, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam. "Just wanted to grab a bite," he said, but there was a sickening assurance in his tone that made her skin crawl. "Anything in particular?" Gus interjected, his voice stronger than before, but the quivering in his hand betrayed him. "We've got a special tonight." The stranger chuckled. It resonated deep, reverberating through the walls. "Special? I like the sound of that." He leaned closer, his face inches from Maya's. "What's it called?" "The Last Supper." Maya recoiled, the humor twisted and jagged. The customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes flickering to one another as dread mounted. She caught a glimpse of their hollowed faces, and they all seemed to share a collective apprehension. What did they know that she didn't? "Just the usual will be fine," the stranger finally said, leaning back. A sharp grin unfurled on his lips, full of malice. The sunlight from the street lamp flickered, casting long shadows over his face, enhancing the twisted features that lurked outside the reach of the diner's feeble light. Maya hurried to the kitchen, desperate to escape his gaze. Her heart thundered in her chest while she fumbled with the order, each clang of the pots and pans amplified by the silence in the diner. The kitchen felt confining, like a prison cell. She could hear hushed murmurs growing louder, punctuated by the strange man's voice. He was weaving stories, a dark thread pulling at the fabric of the diner's past. "The missing people. They went through the back door, didn't they?" His voice oozed from the dining area like poison. "In this very place, just vanished into thin air." Panic gripped Maya like a vice. She remembered snippets of local lore, the folks who had entered the diner and never returned, murmurs of shadowy figures seen slipping through the fog, gobbled up by the night. A shiver ran down her spine. As she stepped back into the main area, she caught Gus staring at the newcomer, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed. "No one's forgotten those stories," he warned, his voice low and menacing. "Maya," the stranger called, beckoning her over with a mocking wave. "You should hear these stories. They're to die for." Her stomach lurched as she approached, dread pooling in her gut. "Is that what you want?" she asked, forcing herself to sound brave. "To scare us?" "I want the truth," he replied, leaning in with a smile that felt like a thin veil over a monster. "And I'll find it, one way or another." The words hung in the air, suffocating her with their implications. Just then, the power flickered, and for a brief moment the diner was plunged into darkness. Heartbeats synced in fear. When the lights blared back on, the stranger was gone. "Where did he go?" Maya gasped, dread pooling at her feet. Gus shook his head slowly, eyes wide with realization. "No one leaves like that." She scanned the diner, looking for an exit, the dread pooling into icy panic. Suddenly the back door swung open, and through it she glimpsed something, dark and shapeless, lurking beyond the threshold. "I think," he whispered, "it's back for what it wants. We need to leave. Now." But would they escape? Or would they too disappear like so many before them, into the shadows of the midnight feast diner? The clock struck midnight, marking the start of something far more terrifying. Maya's heart raced as she pondered what dark secrets awaited her next. Maya didn't hesitate. Adrenaline surged as she bolted toward the front exit. She could feel Gus right behind her, a shadow of panic pushing him forward. The bell over the door clanged loudly, a desperate echo that seemed to call attention to their flight. "Where do we go?" Maya shouted, her breath catching in her throat, but she didn't wait for an answer. They dashed into the night, the chill air biting at their skin. The street was empty, illuminated only by the flickering streetlights, ghostly beacons in the darkness. But as they ran, a dark shape swept across the road ahead, blocking their way. It skulked under the light, a figure stitched from shadows, moving almost fluidly. "No!" Maya's voice dripped with dread. "Keep moving," Gus urged, his voice strained. They veered toward the alley, the grip of fear guiding them through the tangled darkness. Stale smells wafted around them, mingling with their rising panic. They didn't dare look back, not now. Strains of the stranger's laughter echoed in her mind, taunting and lurking just out of sight. As they plunged deeper into the alley, a series of soft thuds began to chase them. Thud, 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 like footsteps just outside their view. Maya pressed her back against the cold brick wall, straining to listen. The darkness thickened around them, wrapped in the murmur of something unnatural. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, eyes wide, heart racing. Gus nodded, a terrified expression painted on his face. "What if it's—" "Shh!" Maya hissed, squeezing his hand. They stood like that for what felt like an eternity, breath unsteady, ears straining against the silence, the thuds gradually fading. Then a scream pierced the air, raw, chilling. It echoed down the alley, reverberating like a death knell. Maya's stomach twisted. That didn't come from the diner. "Maybe we should go back," Gus suggested, but the look in his eyes betrayed him. "Are you crazy?" she shot back. "We can't go back." The second scream followed, a man's voice, full of terror, breaking and gasping. A flicker of light shone from around the corner, casting shadows that danced on the walls of the alley, beckoning them closer. "We need to check it out." Maya felt an unbearable pull toward that light, curiosity battling with fear. "Are you out of your mind? That's how people disappear!" Gus protested, his voice thick with panic. But something deep inside her whispered that they needed to know, that the answers they sought lay beyond that light. "I have to know what happens to them," she murmured, edging toward the warmth radiating from the corner. "Wait!" Gus urged, but she couldn't stop herself. She fixed her eyes on that beckoning glow and stepped forward, heart racing faster. As she rounded the corner, she came face to face with the ghastly sight. A flickering street lamp illuminated an overturned trash bin, strewn with remnants of food and discarded items, but it was the circle of shadowy figures, faces twisted in anguish and desperation, that sent her heart crashing in her chest. They clawed at something foul, something buried beneath the refuse. Gus stumbled back, eyes wide with horror. "Maya, we need to go, now!" But it was too late. The figures turned, their hollow eyes locking onto hers, mouths stretching into grotesque smiles that revealed rows of jagged teeth. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound escaped. Dread consumed her, heavy and suffocating, as she realized. This wasn't just a tale. It was a truth she was never supposed to uncover. With a sudden rush, the figures lunged forward, their shadows blending into one thrumming mass of horror. Maya reeled back, her back slamming into the wall, trapped between darkness and terror. "Run!" she heard Gus shouting behind her, but time felt suspended. As she stumbled backward, her mind raced with questions that begged for answers. What truth had she uncovered? And what would she become if she dared delve deeper? But even as she thought she could escape, a taut silence descended, and it became clear that this was just the beginning. Maya's heart hammered violently against her ribcage. Time warped as the figures advanced, their unnatural laughter ringing in her ears, drowning out reason. She turned on her heel, adrenaline igniting every nerve as she sprinted back toward Gus. The alley constricted around them, shadows stretching like grasping hands. Maya seized Gus's arm, and they broke into a frenzied dash, desperate to escape the encroaching nightmare. Behind them, low growls echoed, taunting in their rhythmic pursuit. "Why are they coming for us?" Gus gasped, his breath hitching. Maya could only shake her head, panic clawing at her throat. "I don't know. Just keep running." Their feet pounded against the uneven ground, urgency surging with each step. They spotted a door to a courtyard up ahead, a faint glow spilling through a cracked opening. Without hesitation, they flung themselves inside, slamming the door behind them. The sudden silence was startling, wrapping them in a false sense of security, the kind that often shrouded moments before disaster. "Are they gone?" Gus panted, his voice shaking. Maya peered through a grimy window. The courtyard was suffocated by fog, the flickering glow emanating from a single dim light. Shadows prowled outside, the monstrous figures lurking just out of sight. "I don't think so. We have to find another way out." As her eyes adjusted, she noticed the courtyard's walls were lined with old photographs, faces frozen in time. But their expressions held something grotesque, a mix of joy and pain. A chill raced down her spine. "What's up with these pictures?" Gus whispered, pointing to a faded image. A family posed, and yet something was off. Their smiles seemed to stretch unnaturally, eyes too wide, almost vacant. "This feels wrong." "Yeah." Maya's voice faded as she recognized one figure, an older man in the back, familiar yet twisted. "That's Mr. Collins from the diner," she breathed. Panic clenched at her gut, mixing with confusion. Why would he be here? She leaned closer, inspecting the other photos. Each one showed the same individuals, families, friends, all local, and each had a familiar figure lurking in the background, the same man, eyes haunting, an ever-present shadow. "Maya, we need to go!" Gus's shout pulled her back to reality. She turned just in time to see shadows creeping toward the door. "Run!" With no time to think, they bolted through the courtyard, dodging debris. The fog clung to them, thick and suffocating. They reached a wall, a dead end looming ahead. "Over there!" Maya cried, pointing to a morbidly bent pipe jutting out overhead. Without hesitation, they scrambled up, fingers slipping against the damp metal as they pulled themselves into a hidden space above the courtyard. From their perch, they gazed down at the chaos unfolding below. The figures moved with serpentine grace, noses flaring as if sensing something vital, their twisted faces illuminated in fits of erratic light. "Is it us they want?" Gus whispered, eyes wide with fear. Maya's thoughts spiraled. The truth swirled like mist in her mind. Maybe it's more than that. Maybe they're tied to the diner, to the stories. The sound of laughter rumbled beneath them, growing impatient, a desperate plea echoing through the fog. It was agony laced with terror, pulling the light from everything they understood. "What did we uncover?" she murmured, heart thudding in the stillness. The shadowy figures began to disperse, their attention turning toward the diner. "Are they leaving?" Gus questioned, relief creeping into his voice. But Maya's gut churned. "No, they're not leaving. They're just getting started." Terror gripped her as she realized the truth. She had to know what lay beyond, what cursed secrets the diner held, and why they had stumbled into this mad puzzle. "Stay quiet. We need to find out where they're going," she whispered. But as they clung to the pipe, the figures turned back, their attention narrowed on the hideout above. And one of them pointed directly at them. "Run!" Maya screamed again. But as they scrambled, the space around them twisted into darkness, morphing into something far more dangerous than they'd ever anticipated. Was the diner a gateway to horrors they'd yet to comprehend? Maya's heart felt like a drum pounding in her ears as the darkness swallowed them whole. The oppressive weight of it pressed down, threatening to crush her. She squinted into the void, trying to make sense of the shifting shadows that danced around them, morphing into shapes that sparked the imagination. "Do you see anything?" Gus whispered, his voice trembling as panic edged through each syllable. "No, just darkness. We need to move." They clawed their way forward, limbs trembling, wrapping themselves around whatever they could grasp. The familiar metallic stench of rust and decay hung heavy in the air. Just as Maya thought they might break free, echoes of disembodied laughter sliced through the silence, causing her to freeze in place. "Did you hear that?" she gasped. "Of course I heard it. Where are they?" Gus cried, his eyes wide, scanning every inch of their surroundings. Before she could respond, a cold breeze swept through their hiding place, whispering secrets of despair. Something skittered beneath them, drawing near. Real fear gripped Maya's throat. She tugged on Gus's arm, urging him to stay silent as they both crouched low. They could hear the shadowy figures below them, their voices a chilling melody of madness. "They'll find you! They must come out to play!" "Play?" Maya's stomach churned. "They're sick!" A beam of light suddenly pierced the darkness around them, illuminating the grotesque images that lay scattered across the ground. A demonic, cartoonish image of a smiling face, eerily reminiscent of someone they once knew, now warped into something monstrous. The strain of familiarity tightened in her chest. "Is that—" Gus leaned forward, squinting at the darkness. "Don't look," Maya hissed, panic rising like bile. But it was too late. Gaze fixed on the grotesque shape, Gus's eyes widened in horror. "We need to get out of here," he said, voice shaking as the laughter intensified. Maya felt the walls closing in on them. It wasn't just the darkness. They were getting closer. "Follow me!" She pushed away from the pipe and wove her way through a narrow passageway, dragging Gus behind her. The air grew dense and suffocating, sticking to their skin like cotton candy, heavy with an unshakable dread. With trembling hands, Maya reached for a rusty doorknob at the end of the passage. It barely turned in her grasp, but with a hard shove, the door creaked open into a dimly lit room lined with more photographs, snapshots of anguish and madness. "Not again!" Gus cried, stepping back. "Focus! We need to find another exit." While her mind raced, they slipped into the room, trying desperately to ignore the faces that seemed to watch them, pleading for salvation, or perhaps reveling in their fear. Suddenly the floorboards creaked ominously beneath their weight, the sound reverberating like a death knell. "Behind us!" Gus shouted. Maya's blood turned to ice. Through the doorway, the figures lurked, their shapes twisted into horrific caricatures, moving with a predatory rhythm. She could see the familiar face of Mr. Collins in the forefront, lips curling into that same sickly smile, eyes bulging as if filled with something dark. "Maya, we need to—" She didn't wait for him to finish. They dashed into the room's far corner, where a window gloated in its cracked beauty. Outside, the fog pulsed with a life of its own. As they approached, the figures grew restless, reaching through the doorway with clawed hands, shrieking with laughter that echoed in their minds. Maya grasped the window frame, trembling as she looked back at Gus. "Are we jumping?" he whispered, his voice shaky. Maya had to make a choice. Escape into the unknown, or face the horror pursuing them. The laughter surged, a sickening chorus of insanity that felt all-consuming. "We're out of time, Gus, now or never." Terror gnawed at her as they prepared to leap. What awaited them outside? Safety, or something far worse? As they jumped into the fog, the world seemed to shift, the ground vanishing beneath them. "Where are we?" Gus gasped when they landed, disoriented. Amid the swirling fog, a whisper reached out, carrying the unmistakable scent of fried food, wrapping around them like a noose. The diner loomed ahead, familiar and grotesque, a beacon in their nightmare. "Maya!" Gus's voice trailed off. And as they stood, caught between horror and a desperate need for answers, an ominous sound pulsed from within. The bell over the diner door chimed. What did we walk into? In that moment, the diner's inviting glow felt like a trap, and the shadows behind them in the fog only deepened. Was there any escape from this hell? And what had they awakened? The door creaked open, a reluctant welcome that sent chills up Maya's spine. The dim light inside flickered like a heartbeat, matching the rapid thump of her pulse. A gnawing instinct told her it was a mistake to enter, yet the dread behind them pushed them forward. Gus stepped in first, eyes darting around. The diner was unchanged since they last saw it, its faded red booths and linoleum floors now a haunting reminder of normalcy. but the air was thick with something rotten, a lingering despair that clung to the walls like regret. "Something feels wrong," Gus whispered, glancing at the gathering shadows in the corners, watching, lurking. Instead of responding, Maya focused on the counter at the back, where an old jukebox sputtered a warped melody, its once cheery notes twisted into a haunting lullaby. The clatter of utensils in the back sounded too much like whispers, conspiratorial and sinister. She could almost decipher what they were saying. Her blood ran cold at the thought. "Maya?" Gus lay a trembling hand on her shoulder, pulling her back from the edge of her thoughts. "Let's just find an exit." They moved through the diner, avoiding the gazes of the photographs lining the walls, faces she could almost recognize, twisted by a malevolence that made her skin crawl. Each wide grin looked like a scream trapped in a smile. "Maya, look!" Gus pointed to the special board hanging askew. The food items they used to love were crossed out one by one, leaving a message scrawled in red. "You shouldn't have come back." A wave of nausea washed over her as reality crashed in. "What is this place?" Her voice trembled, breaking the thick tension. "What do they want? Maybe it's just a prank, a sick joke." Gus tried to sound brave, but there was a quiver in his tone that betrayed him. Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the kitchen. It was a woman in a stained waitress uniform, her expression blank, robotic. "Welcome to Arlo's Diner. Can I take your order?" Her voice was devoid of warmth, a synthetic echo, making Maya shudder. Just water, please." Gus stammered, eyes wide. The waitress didn't move, just stood there with a fixed gaze, as if trapped between reality and something else, something darker. Maya felt a chill crawl up her spine. She couldn't help but glare into the woman's eyes, searching for some spark of humanity. "We're passing through. Do you know the way out?" But the waitress only blinked, a faint ghostly smile creeping across her lips. "All roads lead to here. You'll find what you seek, but at a cost." "What cost?" Gus asked, the sharpness of fear creeping back into his voice. The air shifted, growing colder. "A memory lost, or a soul reclaimed," she replied, before turning and disappearing into the depths of the diner. "What the hell does that mean?" Maya breathed, panic clawing at her throat. "I don't know." Gus swallowed hard. "But we have to find a way out before—" "Before what?" The shadows around them thickened, swallowing the comforting light of the diner as another eerie laugh echoed from the back. It was different this time, a sound laced with malice, as if it recognized them. "Maya, we have to go now." Gus turned, pulling her toward the door, but the door slammed shut, locking them in, the dim light flickering violently, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and warped. The jukebox screeched, drowning their struggles in an agonizing crescendo. "Maya!" Gus shouted, desperation coloring his voice. They turned to see the waitress back, now joined by others, figures from the photographs, their faces contorted in rage and sadness. "What do you want from us?" Maya screamed, stumbling backward. The figures advanced, a tidal wave of sorrow and fury. The diner felt alive, pulsating with rage as the shadows reached for them. And then everything went dark. When the lights flickered back on, they found themselves at a booth, a steaming plate set before them, the allure of home-cooked food nearly unbearable. "Eat, and remember!" A whisper slid through the air like smoke. Gus's eyes met Maya's, brimming with unshed tears. "What are they doing to us?" he whispered, horrified and confused. Maya trembled, frozen by the oppressive weight of what lay before them. The whisper urged her, filling her mind with tantalizing memories of bliss, a hint that maybe, just maybe, fear was better than complacency. But what would they sacrifice to escape this trapped reality? And what strange memories awaited them, hidden beneath the surface? They sat there, the aroma swirling, tugging at their senses like an unwelcome embrace. Maya swallowed hard, the warmth from the dish rising up to her chest. She fought the urge to reach out, to pick up the fork glinting in the low light. It promised comfort, warmth, an echo of safety. "Don't!" Gus warned, his voice barely a whisper. "It's a trick." "What if it isn't?" Maya replied, her voice trembling. A part of her craved the solace that the meal invoked, memories of family dinners, laughter and love, all wrapped in the steam rising from the plate. Suddenly the lights flickered again, more erratically this time, illuminating the twisted faces around them. The figures were closer now, their eyes dark voids, swirling with anguish. She could hear their breath, a chorus of rasps and gasps, punctuated by an occasional sob that echoed in the hollow space. They watched, always watching, as if waiting for the moment to pounce, to claim their choice. Are we supposed to eat?" Maya asked, panic fluttering in her chest. "Is that what they want?" "Look at them," Gus urged, his eyes wide with fear. "We can't let them manipulate us. We need to find a way out." But the smell... It wrapped around her like fog, sweet and tempting. A memory of her grandmother's special recipe flashed in her mind. Maya's heart raced. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice, the way it vibrated with love. "Food brings warmth," it told her, an insistent echo. "Do you think they're waiting for us to choose?" she said, eyes darting from Gus to the plate, back to the ghosts surrounding them. "Maybe it's about what we decide." "Or what we remember," Gus cut in sharply, "and how much it costs." "Eat and remember." The whisper hung in the air, palpable and sweet, suffocating her resolve. The looped laughter exploded from the jukebox, mocking them, filling the diner with an oppressive haze. Shadows morphed into swirling figures, blackened arms reaching out as if they wanted to drag them into a memory of their own. Maya clenched her fists, but one small movement of her hand betrayed her, tantalized by the steam. "Stop it, Maya," Gus pleaded. "Don't give in." She wavered at the edge of hesitation, the plate trembling like her hands. But then there was a shift, a quiet thud, like someone clattering a plate. Maya instinctively turned her head to the kitchen, where shadows seemed to grasp and wrestle with one another. From the murkiness of the darkness emerged another figure. This one was older, the shadow elongated and hunched, face obscured. "Maya, Gus," the voice beckoned, soft and wavering, yet compelling like a siren's call. "Help me." A chill ran down her spine as the voice stirred recognition. It was a woman, familiar, yet covered in layers of decay. "It's... Mom?" "Don't!" Gus shouted, wild-eyed, gripping Maya's arm with a strength forged from fear. "Don't listen to it." But the woman's gaze, haunted yet pleading, bore deep into Maya's soul, awakening something she thought was long buried. "Help me find peace, please." The words flowed like smoke, alluring, heavy. Maya clutched her head, the torment of choice suffocating her senses. Should she let hunger steal her reason? Should they submit to whatever this diner demanded? "No!" Gus pulled her closer, desperation spurring his bravery. "We have to fight." The plate crackled under the weight of tension, steam rising like spectral fingers, weaving into Maya's thoughts. The faces around them twisted, intertwining sorrow and anger, demanding retribution. The woman's eyes shifted, showing a flicker of remorse before she faded back into the shadows. "The cost is everything. Go!" Gus shouted, his voice razor-sharp. He dragged Maya back, inching toward the door, but the space warped around them, the diner sighing as if alive, raw and breathing. Then thunder crashed outside, rattling the windows like bones in a grave. "What if we're too late?" Maya cried, heart racing, fear a tidal wave in her chest. "We can't give in." He pulled her again, but shadows closed in, a snarl rising from the depths of despair. As they surged toward the door, the whispers crescendoed in a frenzy, accusing, demanding. Just as they reached for the doorknob, the lights flickered again, and then went out. Screams erupted, drowning in darkness, each one a reminder that escape wasn't guaranteed. "Maya!" echoed from the abyss. From that void, every gaze turned towards them, awaiting their next misstep. What would they ultimately sacrifice? And who would pay the price? And as silence descended, ghostly fingers brushed against Maya's back, urging her to remember something dark, something that could change everything. The darkness was thick, oppressive, smothering every breath. Maya pressed against Gus, feeling his heartbeat racing, reverberating like a frantic drum against her own chest. She strained to peer into the blackness, searching for any hint of light, any sign of the cursed minions surrounding them. "Maya?" The voice slithered back into her mind, wrapping around her thoughts. "Help me." "No!" Gus shouted again, a fierce protectiveness igniting within him. His hold tightened on her arm, pulling her closer, grounding her in that moment. "We don't trust it. It's a trap." Yet still the whispering grew louder, rising in pitch, a haunting melody of desperate voices intertwined and longing. They called out, each tone a reminder of something lost, something stolen. The ghosts were relentless, their cries woven with desperate urgency. "Maya!" Then the lights flickered back on, harsh and jarring, illuminating the diner in a pale, unwelcoming glow. But the shadows didn't retreat. They clung to the walls, creeping closer, eager like wolves circling their prey. The twisted faces formed a grotesque chorus, all eyes fixated on her. She felt the warmth of tears prick at her eyes, the pressure of 1,000 memories clawing at her mind. She didn't want to listen. She didn't want to remember. But the banquet plate's aroma hung in the air, lingering like a spell. "Maya!" The voice echoed again, her mother's face looming, the sorrow etching deeper into her features. "You can end this suffering. You must choose." Gus shook her, pulling her attention back to him. "We have to go, now!" Yet her feet felt cemented to the ground, as if the very shadows beneath her were wrapping around her ankles. The spectral hands reached out, fingers elongated, stretching toward her very soul. With each heartbeat, they begged her to yield, to choose something over nothing. The jukebox crackled, displacing the tension. Then it thundered to life, blaring a warped rendition of a lullaby, a painful childhood memory brought back from the depths. It haunted her, drowning out the chaos, coaxing her back into that comforting haze of the past. But each tender note twisted, revealing the underlying darkness, amplifying her fear. She felt it weighing down on her shoulders. With each passing second, she sensed Gus's impatience growing, his breath quickening. "Don't give in. Think." His voice cut through the melody, but the weight of nostalgia tugged at her core, her heart thundering in her ears like a frantic drum signaling surrender. "Choose, Maya!" echoed the specters, their voices layered, eerily hypnotic. "Choose redemption, choose salvation, or choose despair." Gus, seeing her resistance falter, clasped her shoulders, forcing her to focus. "We can fight this. Remember the love, not the hurt. We can't let them twist our memories." Yet the shadows tightened their grip, viscous tendrils curling around Maya's presence, urging her closer to the plate, to the forbidden promise it held. She felt despair bleeding into hope, love into madness. She fought it, but every desperate plea whispered through her thoughts. She glanced at Gus, who now stood as her only anchor against this swirling darkness. And then the ground trembled beneath them. The diner shuddered, resonating like a heartbeat, shaking the walls and rattling the windows. The dim lights flickered again, but not just dimming. They flickered violently, illuminating the horror ripping through the diner as a horrific scream sliced through her consciousness. "No!" Gus shouted, pulling her away, but something unseen snagged at her sleeve, tearing away hope like paper. In that burst of chaos, the plate clattered to the floor, shattering like glass, splattering its contents, pure darkness, across the floor. The shadows recoiled, biting back, but Maya felt something rising within her. "Enough!" she screamed, adrenaline igniting within her so fiercely it momentarily blinded her to the surrounding darkness. And then panic erupted. The shadows writhed, recoiled, shrieking in pain as she pushed forward. The ghosts screeched, the atmosphere thickening, drawing closer, threatening to swallow them whole. But as they rushed toward the door, in the fringes of her consciousness, Maya heard a final voice that stopped her in her tracks. Remember, the truth lives in choices. The world around her trembled, and as she turned to face Gus, the shadows twisted and formed grotesque figures of familiar faces. Each one held out a hand, beckoning her back into the depths of her twisted memories. Would she turn away, or would she remember the truth that lay buried? Both paths were riddled with peril, drenched in blood and secrets. "Do you know what you're asking?" she whispered, the choice clawing at her will. The shrieks became thunderous, a cacophony of the forgotten as her past closed in like a vice. "Maya," the figures pleaded, "choose." And it resonated deep in her soul, a haunting echo that would demand an answer. What awaited at the end of that choice? Would it be redemption or eternal despair? The very threads of her fate were being woven anew, and the diner felt alive, hungry for its next victim. Maya's heart raced as she faced the twisted reflections of her past. Each ghostly figure echoed with sorrow, their twisted mouths forming silent pleas, their spectral hands unfurling in invitation. Gus's grip tightened, pulling her away from the edge of memory and despair. The cacophony of whispers surrounded them, a storm of anguish merging with the haunting lullaby still echoing in her mind. "Gus, Her voice trembled, caught between fear and the gravity of what lay ahead. The shadows danced with malevolent joy, swirling around the diner like a predator stalking its prey. Each flicker of light revealed another face. Friends lost, family abandoned, all now mere remnants of life, twisted by fears and regrets. "Maya," Gus urged, desperation coloring his voice. "We've got to go, now!" But she stood frozen, caught in the web of choices that beckoned. The spectral figures shifted closer, their eyes dark pools of despair. The words from the whispers slid into her thoughts like a serpent. "Choose, Maya. Choose." The floor beneath her trembled again, sending vibrations through her legs, grounding her body in the horror that was escalating. The diner, once a place of comfort, felt like a tightening trap. Every sound echoed, footsteps, cries, a heartbeat that wasn't hers, but she couldn't distinguish between real and illusion. "Maya, look at me!" Gus shouted, desperation clawing at his voice. "We've faced darkness before. We can't do this alone. You can't let them win." Suddenly, the jukebox screeched, a child's melody twisted into a grotesque version of love. The chords played like nails on a chalkboard, yet they called to her heart. They teased the fragile thread of hope still bound within her. "Your mother wants you to find peace," a figure cried, its voice dripping with sorrow so profound it twisted in Maya's gut. "I can't," she whispered. "What if I can't bring peace?" The figures faltered a moment, and in that instant Maya felt a spark of clarity. The pain of memories held power, but so did the choice to reshape them. A surge of rage ignited within her. "I'm not your pawn. I will not choose your despair." With a single, forceful step, she broke free from the spectral grip, lunging towards Gus. "We have to destroy this place, whatever is left of it." Gus watched her, understanding glimmering in his eyes. He nodded, determination rallying. "Let's burn it all down then, together. No more memories taking hold." But as they turned to flee, the shadows erupted, swirling into a vortex of darkness, blocking the exits. The diner warped around them, stretching and folding in on itself, the walls breathing and pulsing with a tactile hunger. One by one, the figures melted into the darkness, creating a wall of despair that sealed them in. The ground shook violently, and from the center of the shadows, a deeper voice emerged, low and rasping. You cannot escape the truth, Maya. It clings to your very essence. Her skin prickled. The darkness coiled tighter, wrapping around them like a living thing, whispering her mother's name, an agonizing chorus of the lost. She clenched her fists, feeling her resolve harden. "Let me show you the truth," it hissed. Maya met Gus's eyes, and the strength they shared anchored her. "We'll find a way." But just as she forged a final resolution, her mother's anguished silhouette stood before her, beckoning with open arms. "Maya, can't you see? I need you to decide. You have to choose me or leave. Your fate hangs in the balance." The entity clamored around them, echoes of the past whispering doubts, fears and memories that twisted into weapons against her. Gus stepped forward, cutting through the chaos. "Now, Maya, think of the truth, not the memories. We can forge our own path." But before she could react, the horrors around them surged, more powerful than before. The world around them blurred, reality threatening to unravel at the seams. "Maya!" the spectral chorus roared, the sound vibrating through her very core. "Choose! Choose! Choose!" And in that tumultuous moment, as the shadows writhed and threatened to consume them whole, her choice hung in the balance. Would she reach for the familiar warmth of her mother, or step towards an uncertain salvation? The air grew thick as she braced herself for the unknown, a whisper echoing through the chaos. "What will you leave behind?" The answer seemed to thrum with every heartbeat, but the shadows roared louder, drowning out clarity. What awaited her beyond the grip of despair? As the darkness swirled around them, she felt the truth igniting within her. Would it be enough to fight back the obsidian tide closing in, or would it seal her fate in darkness forever? Maya stood, a war raging inside her. Every soul swirling in the shadows reached for her with clawed fingers, their whispers a cacophony of sorrow and despair. Each one wore a familiar face, her mother, lost friends, neighbors long gone. Their agony clawed at her heart, like 1,000 hands gripping tighter and tighter. "No!" Maya shouted, tearing herself away from the darkness threatening to pull her under. She took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of clarity and strength. "I will not choose despair. I will not be a prisoner of my past." Gus stood firm beside her, a steadfast lighthouse amid the storm. "We're in this together," he said, his voice unwavering, cutting through the chaos. "We create our own destinies, Maya. Remember that." The shadows writhed with fury, their whispers raging, demanding she surrender to the familiar comfort of her memories, the bittersweet ache of her mother's love. But Maya felt something shift. A spark ignited deep within, fueled by Gus's presence, by the truth she was beginning to realize. "Your memories don't define you," she called out, her voice resonating through the overwhelming tide of darkness. "I choose to remember the love, not the loss. You don't get to keep me." With that, she reached for Gus's hand, the warmth of their bond igniting a fierce blaze of hope. Together they surged against the spiraling terror, breaking the chokehold of the diner's malevolence. The shadows shrieked in horror, their forms flickering like candle flames exposed to the wind. The room shook violently, walls constricting and expanding as if the diner itself was alive, fighting back against the truth threatening to break free. Pictures on the walls shattered, splintering into echoes of lost gestures, their holders morphing into swirling spectres of anguish. "Keep moving!" Gus shouted, pulling her toward the final door. It shimmered with otherworldly light. Maya urged her feet forward as the shadows lunged, but the bond between her and Gus was a shield they held strong through the tempest. As they reached the door, it swung open, revealing blinding light. An overwhelming rush of warmth flooded over them, a wave of clarity that shattered the haunting whispers, pulling them both through the threshold. They tumbled into a place outside time, feeling weightless, suspended between what had been and what could be. "Maya," Gus murmured, breathless. The oppressive strain of darkness melted away. Staring at the infinite horizon ahead of them, Maya glanced back only once at the diner. In that moment, she saw the faces twisting in pain. But now there was something else. Their mouths shifted from anguished cries to something resembling relief. "Goodbye," the whispers echoed, now tinged with a bittersweet understanding. As the light surrounded them, the diner faded into the fog, and she witnessed its bricks crumble like old memories set free. Each layer of the building peeled away, twisting back into dust, leaving behind the ghostly figures who began to dissolve into nothingness. "Did we do it?" Gus gasped, eyes wide as the earth solidified beneath their feet. Maya's heart raced, sensing that the burden of the past had truly lifted. "We fought back, Gus. We chose life, and we faced the truth." A wave of relief washed over them, cascading through their very bones as the nightmares turned back to whispers, giving way to a quiet promise of healing. As light enveloped them completely, the once harsh reality warmed into something soft and inviting. "We're free," she whispered. And with each reflection of their adventures, they both vowed to move forward. They wouldn't simply escape, they would rebuild. If you've made it this far, now's the time to take action. Subscribe immediately to catch all the exclusive stories waiting just for you. You need to click that bell for notifications so you never miss out again. Smash that like button now. Let's feed this algorithm so everyone can discover these wild tales. Flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this ending. What do you think will happen next? And don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Remember, true fans show their support.